She didn't shout. She didn't slam the table. She didn't even raise her voice. But what Jasmine Crockett did that morning, live on national television, made one of the most media-trained political figures in America fall apart in front of millions. Caroline Leavitt walked into the studio ready for a fight. She had rehearsed lines, flashy stats, and a smirk that had disarmed countless opponents before. What she didn't expect: a navy blue folder resting on Jasmine's lap, a single piece of paper inside, and a silence so sharp it shattered the entire performance. What Jasmine revealed wasn't just a memo. It was a trap Caroline had helped build. One that finally snapped shut. The look in Caroline's eyes said it all. This wasn't a debate anymore. This was exposure. Raw, undeniable, and televised. If you think politics is just about talking louder, this moment will change your mind. When Jasmine Crockett stepped into the studio that morning, she wasn't carrying anger, nor a rehearsed speech. She carried a navy blue folder, nothing more. Tucked under her arm like a quiet companion, it didn't look like a threat. Not to anyone. But it was. Across the room, Caroline Leavitt adjusted her microphone and joked with the crew. Her energy was loud, polished, confident. The kind of confidence that comes from being used to winning in front of a camera. She had her talking points ready, her smirks rehearsed, her targets selected. She thought this was just another debate. But Jasmine had come for something else. The studio, set in a quiet suburb outside Scottsdale, Arizona, was unusually tense. The floor manager whispered instructions into his headset. The lighting crew double-checked every angle. One of the producers would later say, "It felt like a thunderstorm was coming, and no one knew where it would strike." Jasmine didn't speak to the crew much. She simply greeted each person with a polite nod and returned to her chair in the green room. Her fingers gently rested on the edge of the folder, not gripping it, but connected to it, like it was part of her intention. Inside that folder was a single document. Just one. But it held more power than any speech she could have given. Caroline arrived 10 minutes before airtime, laughing with her assistant, iced coffee in hand. When she spotted Jasmine, she offered a smile, not of kindness but of performance. She wasn't looking at an opponent. She was looking at a setup she thought she could control. But Jasmine wasn't there to react. She wasn't there to argue. She was there to reveal. When the cameras rolled and the show began, everything seemed normal. The host welcomed both women, and Caroline launched into her first monologue before the moderator had even finished his question. Jasmine stayed calm, composed, her eyes steady, her hands resting lightly on the folder. She waited, because Jasmine Crockett didn't come to shout. She came to show. And she knew, when the moment arrived, the silence would speak louder than any headline. The opening minutes of the broadcast unfolded like any other. Caroline Leavitt dominated the conversation, weaving between topics with the ease of a seasoned media personality. She spoke about border policy, budget concerns, and education spending with calculated flair, delivering each point like a viral soundbite waiting to happen. Jasmine Crockett sat quietly across from her, pen in hand, eyes steady. She offered short responses, never interrupting, never raising her voice. Viewers at home might have thought she was unprepared, or worse, outmatched. But the producers in the control room knew better. There was a strange stillness to her, like someone standing on the edge of a moment no one else could see coming. And then came the fifth question. "Congresswoman Crockett," the moderator said, "how do we reduce the toxic nature of political rhetoric today?" Jasmine took a breath. Then, with absolute calm, she reached down, opened the navy blue folder, and pulled out a single piece of paper. "I think before we can fix toxic rhetoric," she said, handing the document to the moderator, "we need to talk about who benefits from it." Caroline narrowed her eyes. "What is this?" the moderator asked. "It's an internal memo," Jasmine said. "Approved by MS. Leavitt's campaign 2 weeks ago. It outlines a strategy to target women of color in Congress, not through policy, but by provoking them on air and labeling them irrational when they respond." The room fell silent. Even the hum of the studio lights seemed to fade. Caroline blinked, caught off guard, and quickly snapped, "That's fabricated." But Jasmine didn't flinch. "Read it," she said simply. The moderator scanned the page. His expression changed. Caroline leaned forward. "You staged this. You came here to set me up." "No," Jasmine replied. "I came here to stop playing by your script." Tension crackled across the studio. One of the producers whispered, "Keep rolling." "I didn't leak this document for revenge," Jasmine continued. I held on to it to verify it first. Because I knew when I used it, it had to speak for every woman who's ever been called too emotional just for defending herself. Caroline stood abruptly, her voice trembling. This is political theater. No, Jasmine said calmly. This is the truth. And I'm just giving it room to breathe. And in that moment, something shifted, not just in the broadcast, but in the tone of political dialogue itself. Jasmine hadn't raised her voice. But somehow, she had just taken control of the entire room. The moment Jasmine placed that paper on the table, the broadcast was no longer just a debate, it became a reckoning. Caroline, flustered and visibly shaken, tried to reclaim control. But it was too late. The audience had seen the memo. The moderator had read it. And Jasmine hadn't even stood up. She didn't have to. When the cameras finally cut to commercial, there was a silence no one dared to fill. In the control room, the lead producer whispered, "We just witnessed something historic." But the real aftermath unfolded off camera. Clips from the segment exploded across social media. Within hours, hashtags like #CrockettClarity and #SilenceIsPower trended nationally. The memo itself, now verified by multiple reporters, ignited a storm. Former staffers from various campaigns stepped forward, admitting that similar tactics had been used for years, weaponizing emotion, especially against women of color, to frame them as unfit for leadership. Jasmine didn't speak publicly that night. No tweets. No press release. Just silence. And that silence said more than any soundbite ever could. Caroline, on the other hand, released a carefully produced apology video. Set against a white backdrop with softened lighting, she claimed she had never seen the memo and that if it existed, she disavowed its contents. But something in her tone felt rehearsed. People noticed. One popular comment read, "She's not sorry for what she did. She's sorry it got aired." But what truly shook the public came 2 days later, when a young woman named Dana Haskins appeared on a small local news station in Ohio. Hands trembling but voice steady, she introduced herself as the whistleblower. "I was on the communications team. I helped write that memo," she said. "And I leaked it, not for revenge, not for politics. I leaked it because I couldn't stand what we were becoming." Her interview set off a second wave. Other insiders anonymously confirmed similar strategies had been used. Phrases like minority meltdown, camera-ready rage, and emotionally rehearsed were standard language in internal documents. Suddenly, the issue was bigger than Jasmine and Caroline. It was about a system that had quietly trained itself to provoke, frame, and silence voices that challenged the norm. Congress began to stir. Lawmakers from both sides issued joint statements condemning emotionally manipulative media strategies. A bipartisan group even introduced preliminary legislation aimed at transparency in political communications training. And still, Jasmine didn't gloat. She didn't tour news studios or deliver fiery speeches. Instead, she held a quiet community forum in Tyler, Texas. No cameras, just chairs in a school gymnasium. One elderly woman asked her, "How did you stay calm when she attacked you like that on live television?" Jasmine smiled softly and said, "Because I wasn't alone. I was sitting there with every woman who's ever been silenced and told to smile through it." A younger man stood and asked, "But isn't it unfair that women like you have to be flawless just to be heard?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, it is. And I'm not trying to be flawless anymore. Just clear. Because the next generation doesn't need perfection. They need permission to speak, to stand, to resist." By the end of the week, The Atlantic published a feature titled, "Jasmine Crockett Didn't Win the Debate." She changed the rules. It broke down how her silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. How she didn't destroy her opponent, but exposed a system. How she didn't yell, but somehow made the world listen. In classrooms, her clip was replayed as an example of modern civics. In corporate trainings, the memo became a warning sign. In Congress, her act became known quietly as the Crockett Clause, a standard that political teams should now answer to. And for millions watching from their homes, something changed. Not in one loud moment, but in the echo of Jasmine's quiet strength. She didn't raise her voice. She raised the bar. Jasmine Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't storm out. She didn't need theatrics. What she did was far more powerful. She held up a mirror to a system designed to silence women like her. That single sheet of paper didn't just expose a campaign. It exposed a culture. And Jasmine? She stood tall, calm, and unshaken, proving that real leadership isn't about shouting the loudest, but standing firmly in truth when the world wants you to break. In an era addicted to noise, she reminded us, silence, when rooted in justice, can shake the ground. Now we ask you, have you ever been labeled too emotional for simply defending yourself? Have you ever stayed silent? Not because you had nothing to say, but because no one was ready to hear it? If this story spoke to you, don't scroll past. Leave a comment, share your truth, and subscribe because stories like this deserve to be heard.